Right. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for another UK film review interview. Very happy to say I'm here today with Phil Claydon, director of Helloween. Very warm welcome, Phil.
James, lovely to be here.
Thank you for being here and taking the time to be here. To begin, could you just give us a very brief sort of summary of to you what this film is and what it's about?
This film is set during the 2016 creepy clown craze, which is sweeping the UK, and all the clowns are wearing the same makeup. So, a journalist by the name of John Parker starts to believe it has something to do with an incarcerated serial killer by the name of Carl Kane, who went by the name Kane the Killer Clown. And he thinks there's somehow a link between what he's doing and what's happening on the outside, and there's a threat coming. So he jumps in with Carl Kane's doctor, Dr. Ellen Marks, and then go on a mission to try and uncover what Kane is up to. So the idea behind it was to create a real kind of suspenseful, purge-like horror that
Fabulous.
was contained but had a bigger world building around it.
Fabulous, fabulous. I mean, you mentioned the Purge right off the bat. I would say that I really enjoyed the film most when I was just like it felt like it was in conversation with a lot of, horror films past, and there are some really loving homages in the film. To me, I would say the most obvious and most prominent one was John Carpenter's Halloween. I mean, the film begins with, a child, killing someone, and then it cuts to years later. And you've also got your own sort of Dr. Loomis, stand in and someone saying that, this individual is pure evil. Outside of the, Purge and outside of Halloween, what would you say are other big horror movies or small horror movies that also had an influence in part on this film?
I think it was because the movie moved so quick, it really was just built on gut instinct from what I grew up with. Obviously, I grew up with loving horror movies and watching horror movies. I was a VHS junkie kid, you know what I mean? I saw Empire
Yeah,
Strikes Back when I was 4, and then I was watching Poltergeist, American Werewolf in London way younger than I should have been.
yeah,
So my entire DNA is influenced by kind of what I like being scared. And this
yeah,
was I didn't really have time to think about it because of the nature of the beast of how quick it was from the idea of the financier wanted a movie that was a clown movie set at Halloween. And because of the micro budget nature of it, it was like, well, it needs to be limited locations. So all of that came into kind of, okay, what film do I want to watch on a Friday night building up to Halloween, October the 31st? Because that's what it is. It was like making a Christmas movie. It's like you're making a movie for a season that, hopefully would
yeah,
enter
yeah,
the October list. So the the only real kind of like the big thing was that opening where I had my own idea of seeing young Carl Kane age 10. And it was the one shot, I still remember it, which is, just when the mask comes off, the reveal of the sort of 11-year-old Michael Myers. And I was going, well, this entire opening should just be kind of like Carl Kane
yeah,
after he's taken out his foster parents, going to take out the social worker who was, tick boxing. So it was kind of like we start off as a trick or treat. And that was kind of like the biggest influence I wanted to do justice. But I have a moment where you can say, this I'm going to have fun because, it's that relationship with the audience, especially when you're making a movie that is kind of like micro budget. Sometimes, expectations are really a lot harder because they're like, well, this film probably didn't have a lot of money, so we're going to give it less time. So you've really got to catch an audience early. And sometimes a great way to do that is like to do homage, do it well, and do a twist on it to say, okay, somebody understands the genre, they know where they're coming from, they know what the audience is, they kind of like you're messing around with the expectations, you're trying to create
yeah,
a fun experience, and then you can go off on your own tangent because it was just like, well, I'm creating a world where I'm just taking a real life event and just turning it into a kind of V for Vendetta type situation. And so it didn't really kind of like, I didn't have time to kind of think this movie or that movie. It's like, how do I create suspense? How do I create some cool set pieces? How do I get this journey that you can stay on for, ultimately, a lot of films these days, they take 25 minutes to ramp up. But I remember from the 80s, you were straight in on the opening Halloween, you're straight in with, you know, Loomis arriving and Michael Myers escaping, and that film does not stop. And I wanted that energy for this, which is we start with this one event, we dive straight into kind of like 2 days before Halloween, and just wanted something very fast paced and a lot of fun. So just had to kind of go with my gut instincts of what I would think would scare me when I was watching it, and then that's what we had to go and craft.
Absolutely. I mean, in that way, I was just sort of immediately amused by the references and then into the story. I mean, we're talking about Halloween. I just thought I'd ask in terms of the John Carpenter inspiration side of things throughout your films. Would you say that there's a bit of a would you say that John Carpenter's style as a storyteller is kind of in your DNA as well as a storyteller at all?
No, I think sort of Spielberg kind of like looks back to sort of David Lean or Howard
Mm,
Hawks or whatever, and I think every filmmaker kind of looks back to see how somebody does something and how that works. When it goes through your own lens, it's
yeah,
kind of like you learn by how effective stuff is and how affected you were emotionally, and how the use of sound and how the use of camera was used to create that. The older you get as a filmmaker, you
yeah,
start to, you enjoy it as a kid, and then you kind of start to break it down and say, well, what was the mechanics behind that? And very much kind of like growing up, you know, Spielberg's films affected me so much emotionally because the relationship he creates with the audience is phenomenal. The suspense he gets, the humor he gets, and I love that kind of approach. Carpenter's films is like the early years, from everything from the Fog was a massive influence on me. I just loved the
yeah,
atmosphere. The
yeah,
suspense of it was through the roof as a kid, and I watched that film more than I've watched Halloween, just because I just like the world. That supernatural world was great to mess
yeah,
around with. So
yeah.
I was infused with a lot of that, and then a lot of the stuff I used to watch, like all the Larry Cohen movies, like The Stuff, Q the Winged
Mm,
Serpent, and how they were like high concept ideas, but really well executed with fast paced, likable characters. And sort of all that just kind of like gets infused in your DNA somehow, and kind of like becomes your own filmic language, and you mess around with it. And I love messing around with kind of like lesbian vampire killers, messing around with tropes of kind of expectations of kind of like what
yeah,
the camera does and why it's doing it. And I love the way kind of Sam Raimi used the camera in sort of Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2, and the playfulness that you
yeah.
can have with it. And
I
that really kind of like, yeah, that comes in a lot with kind of like, I like to have fun. I want the audience to have fun. And that's kind of like sort of, because making a movie is a magic trick. I want you, it's the suspension of disbelief. You're putting all these scenes together in a certain way with some sound and expecting you to be scared. And it's kind of like, okay, how much we buy into that, how much fun can I have with the audience? And that's what you're trying to reach all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely felt that Raimi playfulness in it, and that's a really cool thing. You're just like trying to entertain in each and every scene, and so you're using your influences, you're using your instinct as a filmmaker to guide you, and I think one interesting way in which you sort of experiment, you're talking about playing with audience expectations in that way. I think one interesting thing you do in the story to make it a bit different is you kind of modernize it, make it a bit contemporary by incorporating the sort of internet just bombardment of media discourse, like as a part of the narrative. And I was just wondering, was that a really important part of a script for you, of the script for you from the very beginning?
Yeah, most important could be is the influence that the media has, the influence of social media in particular, the influence of the news. The news can sway opinions, but also kind of like something that gets out there. Word gets out there, people watch stuff. So it was in there, it was within the script. The hardest thing was going to be in post production, making sure you could get all these elements, you could get the viral videos, you could create the graphics, and do all the right kind of stuff. But that's what I mean about creating this. You got the small story in the middle, which is contained. You know,
Yeah,
home invasion, escape, suspense, horror movie, and then this outer world, which is the creating impending doom of like, well, if we went outside there, that could be scary. Like Helloween could be Carl Kane's story, but also I'm sure there was many other Helloween stories happening that night with the lashers and slashers clowns. So it was infused right from the get go, and probably most of my notes, even before the characters started to come to life in my brain, was just in terms of like that world. I would like write like little social media things, and I'd be popping up on here. You know, people would be like having these kind of like special sort of messaging chats. This kind of unrest would be, you know, fueled by this kind of like rage and these letters going out from this one mind. And yeah, so it was definitely there, and definitely a comment on, you know, culture as is, because horror movies always come from sort of what's going on with the culture. It always influences, and it always, you know, because it's inside you. You see it every day, and you realise that kind of like loud, you know, mouse with kind of extreme views seem to be kind of the order of the day in the world we live in at the moment. And they don't seem to be quiet. They seem to be loud and getting an audience and winning power here and there. So that became very kind of prominent for somebody like Carl Kane, where a voice could feed into kind of like people that feel they've been neglected and put aside by the system.
Yeah, I mean, I found the whole social media aspect of the film quite, you know, upsetting in a way. I mean, to even just think about, particularly as you say, in sort of a time when social media is being used to, you know, to foster hatred, and it's just you tap into, you know, quite a scary thing with that. Onto more the sort of technical side and the technical construction of the film, I really, really liked the lighting in the film. I love the use of sort of the neon fluorescence and the mixing that with the kind of grimy, bleachy color palette of the image. Also loved how the moonlight looked and how you created that sort of artificial, that bluish moonlight coming through. I was wondering if you could just talk about how you crafted the overall look of the film, and also what your working relationship to the director of photography was like.
Yeah, James Westlake was awesome. He got recommended by Jonathan. And what I do when I go into prep, I'm always about kind of like the storyboards, the mood boards, and I get very much into the visual aspects of the film. Film is made before you step on set because it's going so fast. So I wanted this movie to be a very colourful horror movie. You
Yeah.
know, I really had that down. I love the colours of Trick or Treat. I love the I didn't want to go down a kind of like desaturated palette. I wanted it to feel like a circus of fear because I thought it was a carnival. We should be like, you know, more kind of like in terms of Rob Zombie, where he just went nuts with colour in his first couple of films. So I thought colour would play on our side. And James Westlake, before we even talked, he sent me through his mood boards of what he saw when he read the script. And literally we had like for like images. So we're on the same page. The question was, how are we going to achieve all this in a 9-day shoot?
Yeah.
Because we're very quick, 80-page scripts, you know, you're shooting 9 pages a day. Every scene was like an insane set piece for a jump scare, or it was an insane emotional piece. There was a lot to get through. But the like, because he had a very cool team with him and Andy as gaffer, and Lewis and Julian on camera, and we had B camera as well. They moved very quickly. We were very set on the color schemes we wanted for each part of the location, and because James was so drilled with his small team, we were able to get it, and he was able to do turnarounds on setups between 10 and 15 minutes, and so we managed to get the colors and everything infused with what we wanted. So when we went into the grade, and then James Gregory, who's my colleague at University of Hertfordshire, came in to grade it, it was kind of like just sort of ramping everything that was already there that we had shot color wise, and just kind of like pushing it even more, especially like the car park scene where we had kind of like pink neons and stuff going on. I just wanted that film, if we talk about references, when we had that location for the car park, it was just reminding me of Joel Schumacher and the Lost Boys. So I says, this sort of offered a cap to Schumacher. The early days of Flatliners, the Lost Boys, there was a lot of neon. There was a lot of kind of like neon. There was kind of like, you know, big fire things in steel drums and stuff. So we both had the same idea of the kind of like movie we wanted to make, and the color palette that we wanted to filter into, creating basically a carnival Halloween vibe and the color. So it felt like, and texturally, the colors say Halloween to me. Halloween's a very colorful time. People wear very colorful outfits. You've got the oranges, and by the end of the movie, we just wanted to make sure that they got as murky and as nasty and grimy as horrible. And that's kind of what it was. So it stays colorful, but it just gets grimier.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I was really glad to see that you didn't go the sort of desaturated route. I mean, you see so many horror films today that sort of lack that expression in the color. So yeah, that was a really good thing to see. So you talk about having the whole film made sort of before you go to make it. You're really a storyboarder. Um, Having said that, were there any sort of surprises on set? Were there things that you weren't expecting that you sort of had to incorporate into the film? Or did it just go completely as planned?
I think everything goes, I would say, completely as planned. It was very well drilled, and that came down to the fact that we had a very small crew, and we just had a very clear plan on the shots we needed to get. And going in it, you have to be kind of drilled. There's not much room to kind of maneuver. I think the hardest scene for me, you get things that throw you. And so one story that threw me and one scene that you always get them on a film as a director. You're kind of there going, I had one idea for this and it's not quite turning out the way I wanted because of X, Y, or Z. So you've got to think on your feet. You know what I mean? You can't just say, oh, walk away, we'll shoot this another day. You ain't shooting another day. So we didn't have any kind of like unit vehicles. So usually if there's a car in the script, it's like, where you're going to, you'll cast a car to make sure the car kind of works for whatever you want to do with it. So usually most scenes were like, who in the crew is not using their car right now, and that will become the car. So it was there was a scene at the house, and in the script, it's kind of a moment where they get in the car's not starting.
Yeah.
Alice runs out to look under the hood, and obviously with the hood up, that's kind of like you can conceal. So you're wondering who's behind the hood. We can't hear anything. When the hood comes down, boom, she's either there or it might be Carl Kane. But you can build tension by the fact of, you obscuring things. So I had this whole idea planned. Obviously, runs around, when we rehearse it, runs around the front, opens the hood of the car, and it's the first car I've ever seen where the hood has a massive gap under the thing. So literally you could see everything. You're pointing the camera, and so the whole idea went out, and I was with the first AD, Jack, and I was going, well, this is completely different to kind of what I had planned. So I've got to kind of figure out how I can make this scene work. So we broke for lunch, and kind of like from that, just had to figure out. I remember shooting it, I was scared in the edit because I was going, oh, I don't know how I'm going to do this in the edit. And bizarrely, it was one of the simplest scenes to edit because it just worked really well just on the tension of knowing what was out there, going out there. It was like irrelevant whether if she was obscured or whether you could see her or not. It was the fact that you felt that there was a presence, something was going to happen. But that's what you got to do. You got to think on your feet. You got to change. You know what I mean? Some ideas you have to put to the wayside of what you started off with, and it becomes something else.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're talking about the quick turnaround and the working at a sort of micro budget level. Were there any sort of other tricks you used or ways in which to disguise the budget? Or would you say that kind of your limitations in that way actually creatively enriched the final product at all?
Yeah, limitations kind of do make you creative, and also knowing going in how you're gonna make certain things work. I mean, there's simple stuff and low budget tricks which you should just know, which is the power of sound. As well as what you can conceal with great lighting and conceal with good composition of what you leave in frame and what you leave out of frame. You can turn, like the location we had, which was this kind of like underground garage area. All these doors are wooden. It's not maximum security. But, through lighting and through the way you can do sounds, through the fact that you put a massive metallic clank on a wooden door, suddenly you're hearing things like unlocking and stuff. You can play with the audience's mind. So it's like, that door's got to be massive. It's probably like 10 foot thick of steel. So you can I hear a film before I see a film. So I knew going in how important sound was going to be is one of my tools to make sure that the audience kind of like moves into the world. So that's the kind of That's the main thing going in. And just, yeah, nothing's really, micro budget isn't a limitation. It's just creatively knowing how you're going to execute everything.
Absolutely. Now, you've made many films belonging to the horror genre. What would you say sets this film apart from your previous releases?
I think Helloween definitely is, in terms of a horror movie, I think it's the most fun horror movie that I've done.
Yeah,
Of Lesbian Vampire Killers, it's in the horror world, but it's a straight comedy.
yeah,
Alone is more grueling, and Within is kind of like more straightforward studio kind of horror experience. But this is kind of like, as I've written it, sort of infused with the whole things in there. It's kind of like it's the film that I'd want to see on a Friday night, as I said, in the October season, in the Halloween spooky season, and that's what I went for. So for me, it's kind of like the most sort of R-rated ambling, close to kind of like my sensibilities, because even though, as I say, it's you have parameters of what you had to do for the marketplace. So you're not doing the initial kind of like, here's the script I want to make. It's like, okay, yes, you could do that, but here's the parameters for the film that we have ready to go, if you can come up with something for that. But you end up, it comes from your DNA, comes from your brain. So it's the closest one, because I've written it,
yeah.
that lends itself to all sensibilities of where I'm coming from. So it's kind of like, Alone was coming in from someone else's script, same with LVK, same with Within. This is the first one where it's like, even though the conception was like, a remit from financiers and the producer, it's like your baby, which you've kind of grown into this insane Halloween experience.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I was just gonna one of my final questions. I was actually surprised that in terms of the violence, a lot of it leaves it to the imagination a little bit more than I was expecting, and a lot of that I found quite effective. Was that a practical or budgetary decision, or was it something that just felt organic for this sort of style of filmmaking?
Yeah, it was organic when I was writing it, because I think just the way my brain works, I kind of understand how long certain things take. And from like Lesbian Vampire Killers, every practical effect, just you think it's going to take half a day, and it takes up three-quarters of the day.
Hmm.
So I knew we couldn't do a film that was based purely on practical gore effects. We couldn't do you know Terrifier sequences. So if anyone went in with that kind of mandate, you're not going to see it. But
Yeah,
it didn't really, my thing came from John Carpenter's Halloween, came from Toby Hooper's Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which are extremely bloodless.
yeah,
The
absolutely.
thing about it is they create an environment that your suspense tension creates things that you can see and hear, and you can do loads with sound, you can do loads with this thing up here. We can see more as an audience that we think that we've seen that we haven't seen, and sometimes by obscuring that or having things happen where it's quickly or you can't quite see what's going on, actually makes it more dangerous, because you can feel and you think what has happened. So it actually becomes a good tool to kind of pull back on being graphic, so to speak. And it really just worked for the film that we were making, and it worked for the time that we had to shoot it in. And yeah, it was a conscious decision right from the off. I figured, John Carpenter, Toby Hooper, they didn't need like bags of gore, and it's going to be okay on this one if we don't have bags of gore, because we just don't have the time or the resources to execute all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you talk about that this is one of the more like sort of fun horror films from your eyes. Did everyone sort of have fun making it? Was it a fun shoot, or because of the time constraints, was it a little bit like, was it stressful, or was it a bit of both?
I think the crew will probably say it was a combination of fun and stressful, but I
Yeah,
think what I found with an amazing crew, there was a small amount of us, 12, 13, everyone down from like, the art department with art department, makeup, everyone brought their A game. I think they felt a good energy when Ronan turned up and, started to craft his performance with Cole Kane. It just kind of like sparked the entire crew, because they were just like, this just feels like we're doing something, you know what I mean? I'd turn up with like knowing exactly what it is and what we wanted to craft. And everyone's a creative. Everyone here to make movies. That's what everyone wants to do. And it's like when they can see and feel that, the crew just rises and starts to get involved. And that's what everyone done amazing work in that 9 days. It literally was blood, sweat, and tears for 9 days. And then obviously then everyone kind of packs up, and then I had 2 years shouldering post production on my shoulders. So instead of a post production, you wear many hats. You're like the editor, the assistant editor, the lab, the post production supervisor, doing the VFX, doing the graphics. We brought people in for favors to do sound mix and other graphics, and just kind of like you're trying to do as much as you can,
Yeah.
the limited resources you have in post, which takes some time.
Great. Great stuff. Well, Phil, it's been wonderful talking to you. Do you have any other projects on the horizon or anything that's just percolating, something you're thinking about?
Yeah, the one film I'm always setting out to make is my teen sci-fi comedy film called Lust. So
Okay.
if you're a big fan of weird science and John Hughes movies, it's in that vicinity, but it's got an amazing, crazy sci-fi horror twist to it, which would be a lot of fun. But like we say, who knows? You move in to make that, and then something else is on the horizon. And then I'm busy writing a twist on the slasher genre. It's a bit like Fleabag meets Scream, and it's called Dead X. So
Okay. Fab. Sounds great. All right. Well, Helloween is on digital from the 29th of September from Miracle Media and on Blu-ray from the 13th of October from 101 Films. Thank you so much for talking to me today. It's been a real pleasure.
likewise, James, thank you for watching the film and inviting me on. Love talking to you.
Thank you.